series, we're talking about fertility to menopause, and central to that, of course, are your hormones, your menstrual cycle. And in the first episode, I broke that down. I gave you an overview describing the 4 phases of your menstrual cycle and the hormonal fluctuations that are happening at each phase and how that affects your metabolism and, of course, your energy levels. And then I looked at sort of the diet and exercise ideas around each of those phases, which would just help you get through them, as it were, and certainly would make sure that your symptoms weren't at all severe or debilitating anyway. Today, I want to look at the sort of our attitudes to menopause, hormones, menstrual cycle. And with me, I'm going to be talking to a women's reproductive health journalist, English Taylor. Welcome, English. Hi.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Good. English, you're based in San Francisco, correct?
Yes.
And English is passionate about bridging the information gap and, of course, bringing the science learned about women's reproductive health to people like you and me in a easy-to-understand, very clear, concise, honest, and I have to say sometimes humorous way, the way you write. I quite like your style. And often you include a bit of self-experience, so it's just real, open, and honest, which I love. So that's why I got in touch, because where I first actually came across your work was through a website. I bought period-proof underwear. Yes, I know, it's a thing, it exists. Period-proof underwear through a company who is the name of the company, and they are really big on lifting the taboo on menstruation, periods, and all of that. And if you look at their website, the way they speak, the language, they're not afraid to use words like leak, bleed. You know, they're not trying to make it all pretty, and it's a very honest, upfront, which is much the same way you write. So you can see why it was a good fit. But I see there's a real rise in this approach to this frankness and just being a little bit more outspoken about women's health. What do you think is driving this? Why do you think we're finally, long overdue, of course, but finally got to this point where we're speaking like this about women's health?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I feel really fortunate to partner with companies and brands like Thinx who are like-minded in that respect. I think that there's been a longing and a need for something like this for a really long time. I mean, I know that probably when I was a teenager, so maybe about like 10 to 15 years ago, the way that I like to envision my writing is that this is how my best girlfriend or I would break down periods, like you said, leaking, menopause, to a girlfriend while we were sitting on the couch together, drinking a glass of wine, watching Netflix. Like,
that's how girls talk, right? This is, well, one to one. Yeah.
And I feel like I've always had a very open and honest approach around this kind of stuff, and that's something that I'm grateful to my parents and maybe some of my early doctors for instilling in me. But what I have noticed is, like I was saying, when I was a teenager, I remember, going into the girls' bathroom in maybe middle school or high school and having these conversations with my friends and talking about this stuff in this way. So I do feel like these conversations and this dialogue has maybe been happening between women for a really long time, and it's kind of built up to this threshold and finally this breaking point where we're putting these conversations and this dialogue out there. I think obviously over the past, probably like especially in 2017, I mean, we had the Me Too movement, we had the Time's Up movement. There's definitely very much in San Francisco where I live, culture of feminism and women's rights. And I absolutely think that some of those larger cultural movements and forces are enabling these conversations. So there's a little bit more sort of support and acceptance around them. But there's absolutely still, every time I kind of put an article out there on my Facebook or promote it on my Instagram, I know that there's I remember one of my mom's best friends called my mom when she saw one of my articles, and she was like, have you seen what English is writing about on Facebook? Like, she used the word vagina in one of her articles. And my parents are fortunately, you know, very open-minded and very encouraging of what I'm trying to do, but there's absolutely still something slightly.
There's still some taboos. But I also speak quite openly and honestly like that as well. And with my clients, I get them to, I mean, sometimes when you ask clients questions, like you say, use the word vagina, or you say, so how are you still bleeding? Or, and you can see first the sort of recoil and then go, okay, she's a professional, I can answer this question, you know. But I mean, this is how I talk. I'm like, we need to know, you know. And for, like you say, this is how girlfriends talk. You know, it's great to understand the science and know everything that is happening, but actually, this is what you see. This is what you understand, the leaky sheets, this kind of thing. So the first article I did read, the article that you wrote, and I will say all your articles that you write for various publications are available to read on your website, medium.com/@EnglishTailor. So just to know, all the articles I referenced in this interview. But the first one I read, and it did make me smile, was when we say period, you say, and then there's a question mark. And you polled a group of some family, some friends, a whole bunch of women. And the reason why it made me smile, because I've got it here, was first I could relate to quite a few of the answers, but then there were a lot of them were quite funny. But they were the typical ones, you know, bloody sheets, white jeans, big no-no, you know. Thank God I'm not pregnant. I think most girls have gone through that one at some stage. Mary, this one made me laugh. Sore boobs. I sometimes imagine them falling off my chest. They're so heavy. Poor girl. But what struck me, while I was relating to a lot of them and having a giggle at some of the others, what struck me was that most of the responses are negative. There are a few of the more positive ones that Amanda here goes, yay, womanhood. Someone else says, yay, I can get pregnant. And then one of the girls says, I'm fertile. And that's great, but on balance, we do there is more of a negative connotation or association. And, you know, that made me think, that can't be good for our self-worth, right? And particularly when that kind of message is handed down, say, from mother to older sister to younger, to the poor girl who's never had her period. If that's what she's thinking is coming, oh my God, it's such a hassle. Poor girl, you know,
yeah, I've never really thought of it that way. And I think that going back to your original question, this spaces like Thinks and hopefully some of the work that I'm doing, maybe this represents a really big opportunity to shift perceptions around how we think about periods. But of course, you know, it starts with digging into what are women's current beliefs around their periods and menstruation and cycle. And this article definitely paints, like you said, a more negative than positive picture. And it's interesting thinking about like how we can maybe shift that. But I will also say, I mean, periods can really suck, and it's important.
Absolutely. There's no need to pretend like it's all peaches and cream. Absolutely.
Totally.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But they're beautiful too in a lot of ways, as some of these women acknowledged.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing that I've started looking at now, as well, as I've really been having to sort of put this on paper in the conversations I've been having with people. And absolutely, you know, if I had to, I don't have a daughter, but if I had to sit, you know, if I was telling a daughter who was about to experience her periods, I think I would like to stress the fact that this is an important step. This means, you know, this is, you're now a woman, you can reproduce, all those things. And then, yes, you do say, right, some of the practical concerns. But in a way, I wondered if what we're maybe missing, and, you know, is that sort of, some tribes and some religions have a bit of a ritual around these things, and perhaps if it was something to maybe look forward to in that, when that happens and what that means for me. And yes, there's a bit of discomfort and those things can be worked around. Perhaps we'd have a better appreciation, you know? I think it's multifaceted.
I love that. One of my, I have a couple of thoughts. One of my favorite books that my mom gave me when I was younger, it's called The Red Tent. And
I've heard of this. I never read it, but I have heard of this book, yes.
By Anita Diamante. It's
okay.
beautiful. I'm not, my family isn't religious. I'm not very religious, but it tells the story of, it tells kind of a very well-known biblical story, but actually switches it and tells it from a woman's point of view. And the Red Tent was a place, I need to do a little bit of research on this. I'm not sure if this is more rooted in fact or fiction. The Red Tent was a place where women in ancient times would gather during, I believe, the full moon. So these ancient women would go into the Red Tent when they were all on their period. And it was this beautiful symbol of kind of community and ritual around menstruation. And I feel really lucky that she gave me that book at such a young age, because it did, to a certain extent, ritualize menstruation and recognize it as something that can be celebrated and be really beautiful. It's this common bond that you share with the rest of womanhood. And that's kind of a story about my mom. Another piece I did for Thanks was I actually interviewed my dad about
that's what I'm coming to here. I mean, that was so lovely, because being honest, woman to woman, with regards to our periods, is fantastic. And like you say, with a bit of sisterhood, we need to support each other with all of that. And sometimes we can be a bit mean to each other, but on that I think it's great. But equally, getting that message across about what we're going through to men, and it starts with your father, essentially, because that's essentially the first man who ever is aware of the fact that you're on your period. And the article that you wrote with your dad, another very honest account and slightly humorous too, period reflections with my dad. And I have to say, your dad, what a sweetie, what a lovely guy. But what struck me, of course, he's in this household much the same as me. I'm one of 3 girls, and my father was the youngest of 4 brothers. So he was suddenly in this household full of women, can you imagine, all having their periods at the same time, much like your situation. But what I loved in that article was where your dad goes, when you say to him, Dad, what was going through your mind when I started my periods? And your dad says, he goes, I realized I had to start worrying about boys and you getting pregnant. Oh, bless. And then he goes, but deep down, he says, I just didn't want you to be ashamed. And I just thought that was so, because that's at first the male response is, oh my God, boys, she can get pregnant, I've got to keep her away. And then it's the whole, but hey, she's still beautiful and I don't want her to suffer or feel ashamed. I thought that was fantastic. It was fantastic.
Yeah, he kept pain meds in his glove compartment of his car, tampons, was never squeamish about talking about things or going into the drugstore to buy us tampons and pads, and there was a line in the article that I thought was really powerful, something along the lines of, you know, if I were to cover my eyes or cover my ears whenever what was going on in front of me or what I was hearing turned towards reproductive health or bleeding, or
any girly topic,
or if I found like a bloody tampon clogging up the toilet, if I did those things, then that would be sending the message to you, your mom, and your sister that something was wrong and that what you were experiencing was something to be ashamed of, or it wasn't.
You didn't want to think less. That's what came across. I mean, he's absolutely so sweet, and it's in a way, and he, bless him, you know, like every man of his age and generation. I don't know exactly how old he is, but certainly he's of a generation where they wouldn't, you know, it's not just sort of modern day man where he's kind of all okay with this, but just out of sheer love for his wife and his daughters, he's like, look, I love them. I'm going to make them feel okay about this. And my own father, in his own awkward way, bless him, when my older sister, and then it's me, when each of us started our periods, and obviously my mother then told him, we then came home to, there was a box of chocolates on our bed, you know, and it was his kind of way of going, okay, I acknowledge the shift. And it was interesting because things then did change. I mean, he didn't become distant or anything, but there was a new sort of found, I don't know if it's respect or what it was, but you knew it was a moment when your periods started. And it was lovely that my father had reacted in that way, rather, and now we all knew that daddy knows, and rather than pussyfoot around and pretend and all of that. I mean, I think it's really important that men understand. I mean, I know with my son, you know, I've never hidden my tampons and sanitary wear and stuff. I've always been in the bathroom, in the cupboard. It's not like they're on show. But, you know, when he was younger, when he was a young boy, he'd find and say, what's this? And I explained it, but obviously, you know, not all the gory details. You say what it's for, and I say, well, you know, a woman, each month you become ready to have a baby, and then if you don't have a baby, then you bleed, and so these are the things you use. And bless him, what was struck me so much with my son is when they're young, when they ask the question, if you answer what they've asked. I mean, you don't do a whole in-depth infographic, you know, a whole big video or anything. He just accepts it, right? And also, you know, he saw the towel on my bed, because sometimes at night if my period was heavy. So I had to explain it. And part of me at one stage I thought, oh, shouldn't I? And I thought, well, if he sees this as happened to his mother, then perhaps any woman he's ever with, or he'll be more sensitive to girls, perhaps. So I've chosen to do it that way. I know some women feel a bit awkward like that, but my son and I, anyway, with regards to health issues, we're out there. We talk about poop. We talk about what color is it? What does it look like? So my son's kind of used to that conversation with me. But I think it's very important that men are exposed to the practical sort of issues and that side that women experience during menstruation.
Yeah. And what I love about what you shared, I don't have kids. I would like to have them one day, but I like how when your son asked you that question, it wasn't this whole, let's sit down.
No.
Let's schedule a big conversation to talk about all of this. It's just very, hey, this is what happens. This is what it looks like. This is what you use. It's very, it's normalizing. And it's not, it's not this like big to do. So next time he sees that, he's not going to be like, oh, it's just, oh yeah, like that's
what it is.
Exactly. I love that.
Because what was interesting, when this happened because we've had this conversation before with my son, when you know those things where you brace yourself, right, here we go, here's sex and things like that. But what's amazed me each time when I've dealt with it like that, he comes back with with the periods thing, he said, what he asked me was, how does it feel? Which I thought, out of everything I'd just thrown at him, he just went, oh, how does that feel? And I said, well, it's a normal function. And I mean, the answer I gave, I guess, was a bit graphic, but it's all I could think was, I said, well, it's a fluid coming out, much like when your nose runs and you don't know when it's coming. So you just have to deal with it. And then again, I thought, oh my God, is that too visual? But he went, oh, okay. And off we went, you know? So I think your kids will surprise you if you just explain it in quite a frank way. And then I think also what happens is, if men understand, because I know at school they learn about the cycle, so they understand that happens, but if they really start to understand the practical side, I think then men can be more sympathetic in the workplace and all of that. But equally, I think women owe it to themselves not to be too, because we've all known the girlfriend or the woman who's used it as an excuse. And I think that's kind of naughty. You know, I think you've got to be careful here there's one thing about being upfront and honest about if you're struggling or if your symptoms are holding you back in any way, but to sort of abuse that, I think ruins it for a lot of women, right?
Oh, I see. So you're saying if you just want to take like a sick day from work and you blame your period, but you're not.
And or play on the fact when men go, if you say, where girls have perhaps said to a male teacher, oh, I can't, sir, women's problems or things, just to fob a guy off because you know he's kind of too scared to go there. Sometimes feel like that's not helpful, right?
I mean, I think that's playing into some of the stereotypes that we're trying to overcome.
Absolutely.
And yeah, but another another thing that I feel like you might be interested in is I feel like we've talked a lot about sort of beliefs, cultural beliefs and attitudes around menstruation and periods. A big thing that I think drives me in my writing is just getting access to information that's accurate, that's also like really fun and engaging to read. I remember when I went to the gynecologist, I was getting an IUD, and I felt like a lot of my questions weren't answered. I felt a little dismissed. I went home and I was poring over all of these clinical studies that were just so hard to understand and read because of all of the medical terminology. But then I was also reading articles that I felt like were kind of light on authority. And I was like, I wish there was something that was just kind of like striking this middle ground. So it's not just about, you know, having really positive beliefs about periods and menstruation.
No,
and
it's getting the facts. You're right.
health. It's getting the right kind of information too. And that's something I really worry, or not worry about, but with
it is a concern
with people with, especially if there's kind of like a taboo around it and people don't feel like they can talk about it, so they immediately go to the internet, but they maybe find stuff that isn't rooted in fact. It's that's a big problem. There's a lot of different kind of levers that are influencing this entire topic. But I do think it starts with kind of having more open dialogue.
Open dialogue, for sure.
When that awareness and education is out there, then you just have to make sure it's the right stuff.
Well, and the other thing is that the other side of that is that either they go to the internet and so you're pulling just crazy information and not making sense of it, or you end up going to a doctor who has, this is what he's always done, you have to have this coil, or he only, you know, because for him, I would say him, even that in a way is a bit of a stereotype, but sometimes I've seen with some clients, it's like, if they're not agreeing, they have this coil, they're not really happy about the coil and they're really uncomfortable, but that's what the doctor said I should have because of, and they list a few things. And then I'm like, yeah, but it's not working for you, right? So question that. And so sometimes you almost get the other end of the spectrum, which is where it's because the doctor says so, and well, that's it now, I've just got to have this and crack on with it, and that's it. And so you're right, a lot of your articles, I mean, the two I've mentioned so far have kind of been a fun look at our attitude and stuff, but many of your articles talk actually about facts, about, well, look at this and look at that, and this is what I found, and this is what I understand. And I think that kind of information that empowers you, that when you then go to the doctor, you're going, okay, well, what about this? And I've heard about this, and I appreciate your, you're advocating that coil, but I've heard that that's potentially a problem. Why do you think, and so you question it a bit better.
At the end of the day, it's your body, your vagina, and I think you have to be, your doctor, so well trained, but seeing hundreds, maybe thousands of patients, and at the end of the day, it's your health, your body, your vagina, and you really do have to be your number one health advocate. Your mom can't do it. Your doctor can't do it for you.
To the other end of the spectrum is menopause, so that really embodies the cessation of your periods, no more being able to reproduce or create a child. So suddenly your biological purpose is sort of taken from you, and a lot of women get stuck in this thing where they're seen as old. And in one of the articles you wrote on this subject, and you've done a few of them, is where you talk to Dr. Kelly Johnson, who is a clinical sexologist. And the article is called Menopause, Intimacy, and Marriage. And the two of you explore this idea about women feeling old around this time. And I love the way she said, which I thought was such a great way of looking at it. And actually, I've seen it with 2 or 3 women that I know, where she talks about how, so there's the decline of your estrogen and your sex or hormones. And she says she finds that women then in their menopause start to embrace their masculinity and find this newfound strength and outspokenness, 2 characteristics which are typically masculine. And I have to
Yeah.
say, I know of 3 women who have done, I've seen that switch where suddenly you're suddenly at that stage and age in your life where you go, you know what? No, I'm not doing it. You kind of become outspoken, a little bit more forthright. And certainly in this country, it's quite common for, there's a statistic where a lot of more and more women are starting businesses and companies in their 50s. So around that menopausal age where you suddenly go, you know what? I know stuff. I'm going to do it. This confidence comes, you know?
Yeah. I know somewhere in the article too, I think it's maybe a statistic from like the AARP, but they're talking about how more women around menopause age are getting divorced too. Like,
Yeah, yes, that's
that
true.
was really
Yeah.
interesting. And there's by no means not like causation or
No, no,
anything.
no, no, no. It just
More
happens to
just
be,
kind
yeah.
of an observation. And I remember Dr. Johnson was talking about, maybe along with what you just said around starting businesses and blazing their own trails. Maybe it's also about, hey, like I've been in this relationship that isn't really serving me, or I'm realizing I'm really wanting something else. So that could be a
Yes, so
factor too. But
absolutely.
she's
Because,
fascinating.
yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, clinical sexologist. What an awesome title, right?
yeah, I know, that's what I thought. I thought it was fantastic. But she speaks actually from the spouse's point of view as well. And I
Yeah,
think, so we mentioned your dad, dealing about, bless you, when all of you were starting your periods. And then, of course, would have had to deal, as with a lot of men, are having to deal with their wives going through menopause. And those hormonal fluctuations are, look, it's tough for the person experiencing them. Certainly a lot of the symptoms can be very debilitating, and not least the mood. I mean, I had one client tell me the other day, she just feels this insecurity that she's never had, and she said it's not herself, so you're trying to make sense of it and kind of find your feet around that. And then your poor spouse, who's known you as steady Eddie for all their life, and now seeing this, it's interesting to see. I guess you should take into account what they're going through.
yeah, absolutely. I'm really grateful to experts like Dr. Johnson. I tend to, because I still haven't experienced
Sure.
menopause. You know, being a writer and being a storyteller it can be complex sometimes, and I struggle with the role occasionally because it's kind of like, is this my story to tell, especially when I haven't experienced it? But Dr. Johnson actually was very open, and she said that she had recently gone through menopause and she was now having more sex than ever, not just having more sex than ever.
It did, yeah. She spoke frankly
Best,
about that.
like the best sex she's ever had in her life. And yeah, like you were saying about the like having partners and having men be more educated about this type of thing. One thing that I think is fascinating is that when my mom was kind of educating me about periods and hormones and contraception and sex, and even when I was going through sex ed in school, we had one of those courses where they show you all the laminated posters,
Yeah.
men's and women's anatomy and genitals. There's no mention of things like menopause, and it's like,
No,
well, uh, where are you gonna learn about that? And I wonder if we started kind of instilling more education in both men and women from a young age about the trajectory of reproductive health, not just birth control. There might be more acceptance around it, but I mean, like, my dad grew up with primarily brothers, and I would be really curious to ask him, like, hey, when's the first time you actually like really heard of this thing
yeah.
called menopause? Was it when mom was going through it? Was it when Nima, my grandmother, was going through it? He still would have been like relatively young, or maybe like away at college or working in his
Yeah.
first job. But there's even more so than periods and menstruation. I think there's very little information discussion around menopause menopause, and
And
that's
then coupled with that, what I'm finding, because I'm not at that stage of my life yet either, but I'm working with a lot of clients who are just entering into that. And one of the biggest things is that in a way, a woman is her own worst enemy, because we have this kind of, yeah, I don't feel great, but let me just see how it goes. And then, it's 3-4 months of not feeling great before they go, oh, well, maybe, should I go and check? Maybe I'm menopausal, maybe I'm not. Contraception plays a big role. I mean, one of the big forms of contraception, certainly in this country, is the Mirena coil, where you don't experience any periods. So I've got clients who are going, I don't know, am I menopausal? May I be menopausal? Then they ask their doctor and they say, well, we can take that out, but that could mean then that the reason you haven't experienced any menopausal symptoms is because the coil has kept your hormone levels level. And then you go, okay, but at some point that's got to come out. So then you've got to experience that shift. And there's a lot of, exactly like you say, everybody's going, well, what about, and I've heard, and it's almost this case of, if I'm not experiencing any bad symptoms, then just keep quiet because I'm one of the lucky ones, And I don't know that that's a helpful approach either. And so this was, again, one of the things, because in my work, I'm dealing with girls. I've seen girls who have just only been on their periods for a while, but had just got such bad eating still like they're 9 years old, like it's the crisps and the this and the that. And then they started their periods, and you're trying to educate and say, look, there's a shift here, and it is different for you. It's much easier for men because there's not many as hormones at play, and that may be unfair and all those other things. But this is it. You have to take care of you and yourself. And then the other end of the spectrum, where you're dealing with menopause, where women have just gotten on with it for so many years that they almost don't know how to share that they're not feeling great. And often I'm the one pointing out where, and I do this a lot in my practice, where I'll go, yeah, I've had another client who's had a similar thing, or I like to draw those comparisons so then they can see, okay, other people are experiencing this,
Yeah.
I think that comes back to our initial point, isn't it? It's about having it out there and open. And to correct you before that, yes, you may well not have experienced it, but I've read tons of your articles now, and you deliver the information in a great, fun, easy to read way. And so, no, it's your calling. Don't you dare stop. Don't you dare stop.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. As someone who recently got I got my Mirena taken out recently. And it's amazing. I think when I was a teenager, I ate crap all the time, and my periods were horrible. And I was a little nervous to get my Mirena taken out and re-meet my period, expecting that she would be just a total terror, like she was a long time ago. But I think because my diet doesn't consist of Doritos and Ices and Slurpees anymore, it's a little bit better. So I'm happy to hear about that education and nutrition work that you're doing with your clients, because I absolutely think things like lifestyle and nutrition
big part. I mean, I just see with myself, if I have had a month of not doing great on diet, and just for whatever reason, my period is completely different from a month where I'm on it, and that's going to happen too. But it's kind of nice having that little reminder, going, yeah, you didn't really take care of me this month, here we go. But English, you write on many other topics, very well researched articles that you write on contraception, fertility, pregnancy. You are a doula as well, which is fantastic. And you also write on different sexual practices. There is an article that I saw, I haven't yet read, but I'm desperate to read. It's about being a dominatrix by a dominatrix. I think that's going to be a fun read. So, but one thing that struck me as we were talking about educating daughters, and I was saying about women passing on negative ideas about their periods to their daughters and things like that, is to use, back in the day, your mother used the red tent. I know when I was younger, my mother never used it, but there was a book that was going around which they encouraged you to sort of leave in your teenager's room so that they could see what was going to be happening to them. But so in replace of that sort of concept, I would say use one of your articles as a jumping off point. I think, certainly this article, you say period, we say period, you say, that's a great way to kick off a discussion, if you're not that way inclined to talk with your kids openly and honestly.
That's very, very Generous. Thank you for saying that. And definitely not a doctor, but I think that it can be helpful sometimes to. I'm just like my readers, a regular, very normal woman with a period, just trying to translate some of this information. And sometimes I think it can be helpful coming from someone like me instead of someone who's going to just be using words that they don't understand, or go right over your head. So thank you for saying that. It'll be, maybe we can do another interview after I have
But
kids.
when you're done your menopause, then we can talk again.
I can let you know how the talk goes. I need to take some tips from you about how you talk to your son about it.
Honestly, I mean, I sometimes, I mean, my husband sometimes cringes. He says to me, "Oh my God, you're just too honest with him." And I said, "But at least if I'm honest, I've got no then lie or nothing that I then have to continue covering up." And I said, and it's factual. So perhaps if I've given him too much, and the thing is with kids is that if you have given them too much, they just switch off at that part. He literally only takes from my answer what he can take. And that's worked on every occasion. I mean, there's been a few times where I've gone, "Oh my God, did I just start down this rabbit hole?" But each time it's been kind of successful. And then later when he comments and or he says something fairly sensitive, because my son also heard me talking when I got the period-proof underwear from Thinks, which is, I mean, it's incredible. I was telling my husband, and my husband said, I'm sorry, my son overheard us talking about it because I was just talking about it when the parcel arrived and I was explaining it. And my son turned around and said, why have they only just invented this now? And I turned to him and I said, exactly. Why only now? Do you know?
Yes, I love
it. And that's what I liked. I thought I've clearly normalized this so much that you're like, yeah, well, if it's a problem for you girls, then figure it out. You know? And you're like, yeah.
I'm loving seeing all of the innovations coming out in women's reproductive health, from period-proof underwear to really like user-friendly, fun, but also like very scientific sex toys.
Yeah.
Coming out. I'm so happy to hear that mothers like you and sons like your son are out there. I love that response.
No, it's fantastic. So I must say, all those articles can be seen, and I'll repeat the website, medium.com/@EnglishTailor. And your Instagram account is English Tailor.
Yep, I publish, I promote most of my articles on Instagram. It's just at English Tailor, English like the language, Taylor, TAYLOR.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, I look forward to reading more of your articles. I'm going to read that dominatrix one. That just looked a scream, actually. So
it's really interesting, and it's not what you would expect.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, great. Thank you so much for chatting with me, and I'm sure I'll touch base with you again soon when we hit another topic.